the 10 commandments of sales. This is a really big one. We believe as creatives that if we're going to sell ourselves, we have to talk about what we do and why people should work with us and all of that stuff. But in reality, that's only half of the equation. When someone says they need to think about it, that is just an objection. So my first question is commandment number 5. So there's something very, very simple I do and that I tell my clients to do at the beginning of every conversation. From that first interaction with that client is creating the frame. And a frame can simply be, I should never leave a conversation in the context of price. I should always leave that conversation in the context of Welcome to another episode of the Creative Courage podcast. I'm your host, Matt Essam. And today I want to run you through some key principles that have helped creative studio owners to get better at sales, close bigger deals, and attract higher value clients. If you're anything like most creatives, sales probably isn't your favorite thing to do. But when my clients have learned these fundamental principles, it's shifted the way that they think about sales. And more importantly, it's changed the results they get when they have sales conversations with their ideal clients. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button and share it with a friend. Sales is a topic that I talk about a lot with my clients, mainly because most people haven't really had any formal training when it comes to sales. I've personally been lucky enough to work with some incredible sales trainers and entrepreneurs, people like Daniel Priestley. I'm good friends with Chris Do, a guy called Chris Kenny, and just kind of going through and building several businesses myself and really learning what is the difference between a sales conversation that feels natural, that feels good for both parties, and makes people feel at ease versus one that is uncomfortable, that maybe feels a little bit pushy, and that generally results in people saying things like, I need to go away and think about it, or I need to go and talk to my partners, and then never really getting back to you. So when I was coaching some of my clients the other day, they were asking me about some kind of best practices or principles around sales. And so what I decided to put together was something that I called the 10 commandments of sales. And these are really fundamental principles that I keep coming back to when I'm teaching people about sales or how to get better at sales, that really stand the test of time. And they're not super tactical and strategic. So they don't mean you get kind of caught up in your head or you have to think a lot about these things when you're actually on the call. They're just some really fundamental principles that you can keep going back to. So I'm going to run you through the 10 commandments, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each one and kind of how it would apply in the real world. And so hopefully by the end of this podcast, number one, you might have a few shifts in the way that you think about sales. But number two, you're going to have a really solid list of principles that you can keep coming back to that are going to allow you to feel much more comfortable when you get into that sales conversation. But also, it's going to allow you to have more powerful conversations with your prospects and close more deals and land higher value projects. So let's get into it. Commandment number 1 is selling isn't telling. And this is one of the most important concepts in sales, hence why it's number 1. And it's something that most people don't do very well because we believe as creatives that if we're going to sell ourselves, we have to talk about what we do and how good we are and other people we've helped and why people should work with us and all of that stuff. But in reality, that's only half of the equation. Now, there's 2 types of motivation that we can create for people. There's what's called intrinsic motivation, and there's extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the kind of motivation that comes from ourselves when we decide we need to get in better shape, or we need to take the business more seriously, or whatever it is that we want to do. Extrinsic motivation comes from the outside. It's when other people either inspire us or they motivate us in various ways to get something. In sales, we want to have as much intrinsic motivation as possible for a few reasons. Number one, if it's extrinsic motivation, it often feels a bit pushy and uncomfortable. So if you imagine you're trying to motivate someone to work with you, that's a push. And really what we want is we want a pull, i.e., we want clients almost selling themselves to us, because people actually hate to be sold to, but they love to buy. And the distinction between those two things is one feels like it's in our control and the other one feels like it's out of our control. So the question then becomes, how do we create more intrinsic motivation in our sales conversations? And the answer is actually quite simple. It's by asking better questions. So one of the challenges that I often give to my clients, and it's a little exercise that we sometimes do, is you have to have a conversation with somebody, but you're only allowed to ask questions. And as soon as somebody makes a statement, they have lost. And that's the game. And it's really, really good practice, because most sales objections, most people's needs for being able to understand what you do better can be answered through a question. And the things that we find out through questions, like the real objection or the real concern that that person has, are the important things that are really going to unlock and help people to make a decision. So number one, selling isn't telling. And the rule of thumb that I use is 80% of the conversation should be the prospect talking, and 20% of the conversation should be you talking. Now, there are great tools out there now, things like Fathom, various other note takers, which will actually give you a percentage and show you how much you were talking versus how much the other person was talking. So I highly recommend that people use these kind of AI note takers, because they're really good at gauging that sort of thing. So principle number one, selling isn't telling. If you're doing most of the talking, you're doing sales wrong. Principle number two, always present your proposals. Now, how many times have you experienced this where you have a great sales conversation? The prospect sounds like they're the perfect fit. They seem eager to move forward, and they just ask you to send over a proposal. You spend sometimes maybe hours on that proposal, making sure that it's perfect, making sure you've included everything, making it look really pretty. You send it over, and then crickets, right? Just nothing, tumbleweed. And you're like, did they get it? Have they read it? And we have all these questions in our mind. And then we feel like we're in chaser mode. We feel like we have to constantly chase that person to say, oh, did you receive it? What do you think? Have you had a chance to look at it yet? And it's not a really nice feeling to have, right? It feels a little bit needy. And so the solution to this is to just not do that. Don't just send somebody a proposal. Always present your proposals. And the reason for that is because we then get to control the frame of that conversation. So think about you sending somebody a proposal, right? And they get that proposal in their inbox, and they're just kind of maybe scrolling through it on the train. Maybe they're looking at it when their kids are trying to get their attention. There are so many different variables that are going to impact how they perceive that proposal. Whereas if we have them on a call, then we get to control the environment, we get to control the frame, and more importantly, we get to have a conversation about it. So rather than those concerns and thoughts just going around their head, we actually get to ask them, okay, what part of this proposal feels like it's going to solve your problems and feels like really aligned with what we talked about? Are there any parts of this proposal that don't feel aligned? Is there anything here that you're concerned about? Would there be anything stopping you moving forward with this proposal? We can actually structure a sales conversation. We can frame the solution that we're offering, and we can handle any concerns that that person might have, and really get some solid commitment on that call. And I actually push a lot of my clients to get that commitment, to get someone saying, yes, I either want to go forwards, or no, I don't want to go forwards. And we can't do that if we just send someone a proposal. So always present your proposals. That's commandment number 2. Commandment number 3 kind of ties into that a little bit, which is that objections are opportunities. Rarely have I enrolled a client that has 0 objections or 0 questions or 0 concerns. So one thing I learned early on in my sales journey was that objections really are a good sign. Objections are really just opportunities in disguise. They're opportunities to help give that person clarity, to help challenge their thinking, to help them make a decision. And so there are often things that we can do with our products or services which are based around objections. So if we keep getting the same objection about our service, then why not create a feature or something that actually directly solves that objection so that next time we present it, it's almost pre-framed so that that becomes less of an objection or not an objection at all. So most people, when they hear objections, they just take them and they just say, okay, well, I'm sorry that you feel like that, and maybe this isn't a good fit or whatever. They don't challenge those objections. They don't get curious about them. They don't dig any deeper to find out why that person is concerned about that thing. So you actually want objections. Don't fear objections. You want to bring them up. And I often try and elicit them. If I feel like a sale is too easy and someone's like, yeah, I definitely want to do this, I definitely want to work with you, I'm like, okay, well, do you have any other concerns? Like, why are you so keen to move forward? What about this? What about this? Have you thought about this? How are we going to challenge that? Because the worst thing is when you make a sale and then somebody starts to think about these concerns or objections after the sale. And that's often what's referred to as buyer's remorse. And they start being like, oh, was this definitely the right decision? And it's so much harder to deal with that rather than getting all of those objections out up front, getting the commitment in full. And then when you move forward, that person is 100% committed to the thing that you've offered. So that is commandment number 3. Objections are opportunities. Commandment number 4. This one's a little bit more complicated, so needs a bit more explanation. But the commandment is a yes makes money, a no saves time, maybe is your enemy. I work with so many agencies that have just proposals living in the ether. They have deals where they're like, oh, yeah, I think this might be going forward. It might not. And they're putting so much time and energy into this deal, which they have really no idea if it's going to come off or not. People often tell me, no, I've got a really good feeling about this. And so they hang all their hopes on that. They stop prospecting for other business. They kind of maybe say no to some projects because they're like, oh, this big project, we're pretty sure this is going to come off. It's in the land of maybe. And then it doesn't come off. And then they feel really stuck and demotivated and they don't have anything in the pipeline. So we actually want to move people to a no or a yes as quickly as possible. And when agencies tell me, oh, our sales pipeline is often takes us kind of anywhere between 3 and 6 months to close a deal, I know that they're making this mistake. They are hanging on to maybe rather than trying to get that person to either a solid yes or a no. And either way is fine because yeses make money and no's save time. If you get a no, then you put that in the no for now pile. And by the way, it's very rarely no, never. It's often no right now. And so that's absolutely fine. We know that that's not going ahead. Now we can go out and we can actually look for new work, new projects. We can put our focus somewhere else. So yeses make money, no's save time. Let's get rid of maybe. That's principle number 4 or commandment number 4. Commandment number 5, halfway through. Whoever sets the frame controls the conversation. This is a really big one. If you have ever got to the point where you feel like you're attracting the kind of clients who just treat you like a worker rather than a partner, they're constantly asking for amends, they're constantly changing their mind. 1 minute they wanted this, the next minute they wanted that, and you really just feel like this puppet, then this commandment, this principle is going to change that for you. So most of the client relationships that exist, the frame or the relationship has been created in the first few conversations. And most people don't realize that. So this idea of framing is really about telling somebody what is going to happen and taking the lead in that conversation. And so there's something very, very simple that I do and that I tell my clients to do at the beginning of every conversation from that first interaction with that client is creating the frame. And a frame can simply be, this is how the call is going to be structured today. This is my intention for the call today. This is what I would love to get from the call. And getting that person's permission and saying, is that okay with you? So, for example, on my calls, when I first speak to someone, I always say, my intention of today's call is to get you clarity. We want to figure out today, number one, what is preventing you from reaching some of your goals? Number two, would it be a good fit for us to work together? Would it be a good fit for me to help you with some of those challenges? And that's all this call is about. If it's not a good fit, then hopefully I'll be able to recommend you to somebody else in my network or give you some pointers. If it is a good fit, then we'll set up another call and we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the solutions and some of the ways that we could work together. How does that sound to you? So by creating that frame, I've now taken control of that conversation. I'm the one leading the conversation. And so if you want to be treated like a partner for your clients, you need to learn how to lead conversations and lead relationships. That's what that's about. And it starts right at the beginning with setting the frame. So if you only take one thing from that principle, just put a frame or a pre-frame into every call that you have, even if they're an existing client. Okay, cool. Here's what I'd like to run through in the agenda today. This is what I'd like to get out of today's conversation. What would you like to get? And so then you get permission to be the one asking the questions and leading the call. So whoever sets the frame controls the conversation. Commandment number 6, yes lives in the land of no. A lot of us are afraid of no's. And I think that's just a human instinct. And I would put myself in that category. I don't like being told no. But I realized that when someone says no, it's getting me closer to a yes. It is impossible to get consistent yeses without getting some no's. And if you are getting consistent yeses and your close rate is 100%, like when you get on a call with someone, it's like 90 to 100% of people you get on a call with move forward and work with you. That's not actually a good sign. It probably means that you're not charging enough money or you're not being specific enough with who you work with in terms of great fit clients. So just accept that a good conversion rate, what you really want to aim for is somewhere between 30 to 50%. 30 to 50% of proposals that you present to people should get a yes, and the rest should get a no from either you or from the prospect. And so that gives you an idea of what we need coming in at the top of the funnel, the metaphorical funnel, in order to actually have that conversion ratio to get the number of clients that you need. So yes lives in the land of no. And that comes from everything like outreach, partnerships, deals, whatever it is, right? And you'll see it in all walks of life, whether you're asking someone out on a date or you're asking someone to be on your podcast or whatever, you're going to get no's. And one of the best exercises I ever did early on in my business was a mentor of mine set me the challenge of collecting as many no's as possible. He said, if you get 20 no's, we can do this together. If you get 50 no's, I'll pay you like £1,000 or whatever it was, or I'll take £1,000 off of your coaching fees, right? And it was such a valuable exercise because I was actually trying to get no's. And it did a few things. Number one, it desensitized me to the word no. But number two, it inevitably created opportunities. So in order to get a yes, you have to get a no. So see no's as a sign that you are moving in the right direction. Principle number 7. This one is so important and maybe even deserves to be further up the list. Never leave a meeting without another meeting scheduled. Okay, so this whole idea that we send someone a proposal and I'll get back to you, or when prospects say, yeah, no worries, like I'll drop you an email and let you know by the end of the week. No, we are not taking control then. We are not leading them. So when somebody says that, say, okay, cool. Well, instead of us waiting on emails, why don't we just get another call scheduled in the diary? We can talk through any questions that you've had, any thoughts that you've had, and we can just make a decision about how we're going to move forward. So this principle is really important because A, it means that you're not going to be in that realm we talked about earlier where you're chasing proposals and you're kind of chasing people. But B, it also means that you are showing leadership and you are controlling your deal flow. So the reason a lot of people's lead to close time is so long, 3 to 6 months, is because they don't have that sales process to say, well, okay, how long do you need to make a decision? I need a week. Great. Let's set a meeting in a week's time. I will get myself and the other founders on the call. You bring anyone else to the call that needs to be there to make that decision, and we'll just decide how to move forward. And if it doesn't feel like a good fit or this proposal isn't the right thing, that's totally fine. If there are some things in it that maybe we need to discuss, that you need to take out or put in or whatever, then fine. But by the end of that call, we will decide how to move forwards. And so we're taking control of that timeline. By the way, when someone says they need to think about it, that is just an objection. So my first question, without getting too much into this, because this is like a whole different podcast, but my first question when someone says, I need to think about it, is, I understand that. I'm just curious, what specifically do you need to think about, right? So we really want to get down to what is it that they need to go away and think about, because really play that scenario through for yourself. When you've gone away and thought about a particular purchase, a considered purchase, what have you done? Like sat in a chair and meditated, or, gone for a walk outside, or what is it? What are you really trying to get? You're basically trying to make a decision. Well, why not just make a decision now? What's the thing preventing you from making a decision? Is it that you don't have the information? Is it you don't trust the person? That's really the conversation that we want to have. So by scheduling a next meeting to discuss this, you are continuing to lead that relationship and you're positioning yourself as a partner. But more importantly, you're controlling the flow of your pipeline. So for me personally, if somebody needs more than 24 to 48 hours to think about something, I just move them to a no. I just say to them, if you need a week to think about this, it's probably not the right time to move ahead. This should be hell yeah, let's do this, or a no. So what way should we move it? And that gives people an out. It makes people feel relaxed. It's like, oh, this person isn't trying to sell me anything. They're okay with me not moving forwards. So all I'm asking for is a decision, right? And if it's not the right fit, then that's totally cool. If it is, then great, let's get started, right? So never leave a meeting without having another meeting scheduled. Now, just as a very quick caveat or side note, I understand that the bigger the project value gets, the more meetings that you might have to have, right? It's like the first person's involved, then there's more stakeholders, then they need to take it to the board to get the project signed off. But it's really important that you get a meeting for each one of those stages and you just keep moving that sale forward. You keep progressing that sale and you have the next milestone scheduled into the calendar. Number 8, qualify based on buying power, not on budget. Now, this is quite a controversial principle. And I know a lot of people that would disagree with this. I know a lot of people that just say, no, I need to know the budget up front. If they don't have the budget to work with us, we don't want to work with them. However, what I will say is there are often people that set budgets who have no idea how much time, money, resource needs to go into getting the result that they want. They've got a number from accounts or from their marketing manager or something. And very often it's an arbitrary number, or in a very common case, it's a number based on their current projections. Now, this is a problem. And I know if you're listening to this or watching this, you fall into this trap personally. And this is why you buy into when other people do it. We want help with something. Let's say it's lead generation. And we say, okay, what am I going to invest to get help with lead generation? And we look at our current revenue and we say, well, we could maybe afford to invest $2,000 a month into that. Well, the problem with that is what you're saying is you want more leads. So you want more clients, essentially. And so if we get that result and project into the future, our revenue will be increased. And so what you're saying is you want more revenue, but you only want to invest a percentage of your current revenue to get that, which is kind of like saying, I want to go to the gym and I want to get fit and healthy, but I only really want to do it eating the same things that I'm eating right now with the same workout routine. I want things to be the same, but I want the result to be different. And you'll see companies doing this all the time. So we want to rebrand, or we want to build a new website, or we want this incredible animation for this landing page because it's going to help us to attract a higher caliber of client, which are going to spend more money with us, or it's going to change how we're perceived and we're going to get more press coverage, which is going to mean that we can attract better clients. And when you say, what's the budget? Oh, well, our current marketing budget is X. And that's based on where we are. But that makes no sense, right? You have to, if you want more, you have to spend based on where you want to be, not where you currently are, because those two things just don't align. So when someone says, I have a budget of 10 grand and this is the website I want to build, okay, well, maybe 10 grand isn't going to get you the outcome that you want in that period of time to the quality you want it, no matter who you speak to. So you're a little bit stuck. So when I say qualify on buying power rather than budget, what I mean is, A, does the person that you're speaking to have the authority to actually make this purchase? And B, when you look at their current situation in terms of what you know about them already just from the outside, so revenue, number of employees, product value, all of that stuff. When you look at that, do you see that they have the potential access to resources to solve the kind of problem that they want to solve? Like, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at, does this person have the access to the resources in relation to the size of the problem they want to solve? And that could even be like, do they have loans? Could they get a credit card? Now, I'm not a big fan of people taking out loans and credit and things to work with me personally, but there are companies out there who have massive loans and massive debt because that's just the way that that company operates. If they want something bad enough, maybe they let a member of staff go and they use that revenue to work with you. Like, there's a million and one different options. So try not to use budget and try not to ask the budget question. Like, if you've got a form on your website, don't ask what's your budget. Ask different questions which allude to buying power. Because as soon as you ask someone what their budget is, they either A, don't know, right? Or they'll just give you an arbitrary number, which is probably not based on something. So for example, if somebody asks me, like, let's say and I'm probably going to get like a barrage of sales pitches after this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Let's say I want to redesign my website and someone says to me, okay, what's your budget? Well, I don't know. Because like, I don't really know what's involved in that, like in terms of, are we redesigning the whole website? Actually, why do I want my website redesigned? Like, that's what I'm looking for a creative partner for. Someone to come in and say, well, okay, what's the goal behind this? Okay, I think I can help you achieve that. And if we could achieve that, what would that actually be worth to you? Like, best case scenario, what additional revenue might you generate? Or how much could you increase your average project value? Like, best case scenario. And if I think the relation between the difference, i.e. the transformation, and what I charge is relative, then it seems like worthwhile having a conversation, right? Because if I can spend 10% of my potential upside, or even 15 or 20% of my potential upside, that's a pretty good deal. And if I'm fairly confident that this person can deliver that result, then it kind of doesn't really matter what the price is in a way, right? It's really based on my level of confidence of that outcome. So I use one more metaphor and one more analogy before I move on to the final points, just to hammer this one home. If I had a pot, a magic pot right here, and whatever you put into that, money-wise, doubled, how much money would you put in? Would it just be the money you have in your bank account? Or would you go and find friends and say, oh my God, there's this magic pot. If we all pull our money in, we can get double out. Or would you take out a credit card? Would you take out a loan? Would you sell something? Like, because it's really about your confidence in getting that money back, or getting more of that money back, or getting more of the time, energy, resource, whatever you're putting into that thing. That's really what it's about. It's never really about the money itself and the budget, because those resources really are freely available. So that's the last thing I will say about number 8, qualify on buying power, not on budget. Number 9, always speak with a decision maker. So one of the things that I see a lot, especially when people have corporate clients, is they'll do the classic sending the proposal mistake, and the person they're speaking to will say, I now need to go and speak to my CEO, or I need to go and speak to the board, or whoever it is. And that person will not be involved in that conversation. And so you're kind of taking the secondhand information and you're passing it to someone else to then convince other people that this is the right decision, rather than you, who's the expert and got all of the knowledge and has the insights and the third person perspective on the business, coming in and helping to make that decision, and also finding maybe any other relevant information that that decision maker didn't have. There might be some other concerns. There might be some other constraints that they didn't know. So my advice is always to just ask the question, hey, is there anybody else that needs to be on this call in order to make a decision if we decide to move forwards? That's the simplest way to find that out. So number 9, always speak with the decision maker, or at least have the decision maker or all the decision makers on the call. Number 10, this is a nice one. And I think this is just a good principle or commandment to finish on, because I think it benefits people whether they decide to work with you or not. So number 10, I learned from one of my mentors, a guy called Rich Litvin. He taught me that I should never leave a conversation in the context of price. I should always leave that conversation in the context of possibility. So that sounds like a very kind of nuanced, fancy phrase, but let's just break it down for a second. So if you leave that conversation based on here's how much this thing is going to cost, that is the predominant thought that is going to be in that person's head. This is how much this thing is going to cost me. This is the investment. Is it worth it? Do I trust this person? Right? And it's kind of like quite a closed, dark loop to be in, really. I've been there myself. Whereas if we leave the conversation in the context of possibility, it's a much brighter place. So one of the questions I like to ask is, if we did work together and we did do all of these things, what would you be the most excited about? What thing would you be most excited about? What would be possible for you? And really getting people to think about the future of their business, and whether they decide to work with you or not, that's where you want to leave someone. You want to leave someone with the possibility of how things could be, not this kind of loop of this is where we are and can we afford that and what's the budget and blah, 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 blah. So commandment number 10 is never leave a conversation in the context of price. Always leave a conversation in the context of possibility. I hope these principles and commandments have been useful for you. Please try them out. Take them into your next sales conversation, take them into your business, share them with your team, and just see what changes. For me, I've just really loved watching my clients double, triple what they charge. I've loved watching clients go from worker who's pushed around all the time to partner who's valued and seen as the expert. And all of those things are related to the 10 commandments, the 10 principles that we just ran through. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, share it with somebody that you know needs to hear it. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Before you leave, if you found this episode valuable, please hit the subscribe button. Also, if you are a creative business owner doing more than 10K a month and you want to grow and scale without working longer hours or hiring a massive team, then I have something you may be interested in. We have just developed a tool that will give you a custom growth strategy based on exactly where you are in your business right now. So you can stop consuming lots of random content and trying to figure things out on your own and actually get something personalized to you. You will also receive a free copy of my book, and it will point out relevant chapters. If you'd like to take the scorecard, it's totally free. You just have to click the link in the show notes or connect with me on LinkedIn, and you will see a link in my bio. Thanks for listening. This is the Creative Courage Podcast.